Over the weekend, I checked out a handful of on-demand titles, and I wanted to provide a review for each of them, but instead of uploading individual videos, I figured, you know what, let me try an experiment. Let me just see if this works. Maybe it'll work great and I'll continue to do it and do a handful of videos at a time when they're on demand. Or maybe this will crash and burn. Maybe it'll be terrible and nobody will want to watch, or you just say, you know what, this is stupid. I prefer the individual videos. Let's go from there. Either way, though, for ease for you, just so that you don't have to sit through them all if you don't want to, I am going to put the time codes to each individual review down in the description below. Does that sound good? Now, these are in no particular order. Some of them have been out for a few weeks. Some of them have been out just for a couple of days. But either way, I watched them. Some are great, some are not so much. But either way, hopefully it'll save you some money. So let's go. First up, we have Blackwater Abyss, where two couples in Australia go to explore this brand new cave that has just been discovered, but it hasn't been explored. And there they meet an unanticipated danger. Now, right from the trailer and even from the movie poster itself, we get to know what kind of that unexpected danger is, and it comes in the form of an animal. I kind of appreciate that they didn't go over the top with the animal, that they were grounded in reality to try and make it a little bit more terrifying. Because now this is something that you really could encounter, and it just makes it that much more scary. I mean, when you go into places and all of a sudden it's a monster or it's some larger than life creature, then we kind of know, that's probably not ever going to happen. I mean, short of being outside of Chernobyl. So Blackwater Abyss is really a lot like Crawl meets Sanctum, except without the fun of the first and the absolute terror and suffocating horror of the second. One of the things that bummed me out in this movie is the amount of dumb decisions that our characters make. It seems like when they're trying to escape from danger, they make choices to put themselves knowingly in worse danger. I mean, like, hey, an exit is over here, but you know what? Let's go over here instead and sit. What? Why would you do that? Why would you go farther away from the place that you need to be at? And that happens throughout this. Now, some of the shots in this really work because it makes you feel claustrophobic and almost suffocating because you're inside of a cave. And so you're meant to feel like, just the physical oppression of being in there. But at times, they get up close. And I like that too, a lot of the time, except when they go into the water and it becomes so murky and so close to the camera, the action is happening that we don't even know what's going on, that we can't really even see anything. Now, in addition to some of the cave parts being very claustrophobic, very tight, very just narrow and like, ooh, I don't want to go in there. There is one part where it looks a little bit like where Harry and Dumbledore go to get Tom Riddle's locket. It's this wide, expansive cave, and because it's so dark in there, the light doesn't travel from their flashlights or their headlamps or anything like that. And so it does present just this feeling and this overall sense of eeriness. Now, sometimes the music in this really worked, and I liked it because sometimes it set up an expectation just to fool us. But then other times it would play a soundtrack or something that didn't fit, that it would start well before the action did, and it wasn't leading to anything. And the tone of it, the whole feel, took you out of any mounting tension they were trying to create. While I like part of the ending, some of that enjoyment was hampered by continued dumb decisions, again, by our characters. I mean, like, they just would break the urgency, they would break the tension that was being built. And what that then caused me, because they were just doing something very, very stupid, was making me hope for the worst for them. I was no longer rooting for them, I was rooting for their demise, just putting myself out of the misery of having to watch this go on. Now, this does feel a little long at parts, which is unfortunate because when you have a thriller where it is building tension, it is building anxiety and suspense, the time then should click by even faster as each of those ramp up and as that mounting tension just builds and builds. But it didn't. It would rise and then fall and break what it was trying to do, which then just made it drag in spots. So I think for this one, there are much better cave exploring movies that you can check out that are way more intense, way more scary, frightening, suffocating. And some of them have to do based in reality, and some of them are not. And that's okay either way, but at least the tension is there. There is no sex or nudity, but there is profanity and some brutal violence. I give Blackwater Abyss 1.5 out of 5 couches. Next up is The Silencing. In a small town, some girls have gone missing, and when one turns up, it sparks renewed interest in a father who has been searching for his long lost daughter. This stars Nikolai Coster-Waldau, and I'm sure I mispronounced his name, but we all know him as Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones. He is the dad who has been hurting and searching for his daughter for so long. I love what he brings to the screen because there is a quietness to him, but there is still a grief that you see in his eyes, that you see in his mannerisms, just even in his walk, that as he trudges about, you get to see just the weight of all of this guilt or sadness that is on him. Now, in this crime thriller, some of the mystery is obvious, and I probably should have caught some of it way earlier than I did. But as it was, I was going along for the ride, and I was enjoying some of the misdirection that they were throwing at us. There was a point where all of the clues in my head finally clicked, and I was able to go, oh, I know who it is. But it didn't diminish anything. I mean, I was still having a lot of fun. There was a certain sense of urgency and timeliness to what was going on. Now, there is some very dumb dialogue that they put, even in the trailer, and then it makes its way into the movie as well, where there is a sheriff and her deputies who are searching the grounds where they have just found a dead body. And they find an arrowhead shoved in a tree. And so they pull it out, and the logical jump is, well, yes, they are hunting this girl. What? There are tons of hunters around. Why would you assume that the girl is being hunted where she just washed up on the shore? So some of that, it was like, really? That's really stupid, but you're using it as a device to take us in this direction, which I understand that, but I think there's much better ways to do it instead of dumbing down some of the lines. I liked the actors in this and the acting, but I felt that some of it could have been stretched. Like we could have used more development in certain parts of the characters to really dive in more, to examine grief, to examine just motives, where then causes a lot of misdirection and mystery, and not even misdirection, but even part of the plot and the motive, just all of that converges when we know more about each of the characters at play. I really like the landscape in this because it's just very daunting. We're outdoors, we're in a forest, and you just get to see the massiveness of it. Now, some of it didn't totally make sense because we're told the size of it, and then we see people traveling through it at a much faster rate, I would think, on foot than is really possible. But because we're not given total context of each location within this area, maybe it makes sense. Maybe it is totally feasible, and maybe not. Maybe somebody has like a few superhuman strengths and they can fly or they can teleport or something. I don't really know. Either way, though, it doesn't break too much of anything that's in the film. It's just one of those things that I wanted to find out more, or I really wanted it to be grounded a little bit more so I could figure out for myself, as like, wow, you have been running at full speed for a really long time, or, well, maybe it was just a 100-yard dash. So overall, I had fun with the silencing. I thought the mystery was good. I really liked the acting by Jaime Lannister. I mean, he was the one to watch. He drew me into his performance. He's brooding. I do wish that we would have gotten more insight and more development into some of the other characters just to help us build so much more tension, so much more just mystery around everybody. But as it was, I had fun. There's no sexual nudity. There is a lot of profanity and violence. I give the silencing 3.5 out of 5 couches. Next up is Waiting for the Barbarians. It's a period piece where we have a magistrate in the British Empire who is set at an outpost way out in the desert, and there he begins to question his loyalties. If you saw the movie Hostels in 2017, this movie is a lot like that. I mean, this isn't a Western. Obviously, this is the British Empire out in the desert, someplace in the Middle East-ish. We don't really know exactly where. But the story points are shared in this, where it raises a lot of questions. And really the main question that the entire film raises is, who are the barbarians? I mean, are they the obvious ones that we have labeled as barbarians? Or are they somebody much closer? Johnny Depp and Robert Pattinson are in this, but they're not in it for a whole lot. I really like Johnny Depp for his quiet meanness that he brings. He does have a greater presence in the film than Robert Pattinson does, and he brings just a whole different thing. I mean, he's not playing your typical Johnny Depp character, which I really appreciate. That he's not goofy, he's not weird, he's very by the book and very almost stoic and, emotionless, but there is something that is seething from him that is terrible. Robert Pattinson is unused. I mean, he's almost one-dimensional. He's playing a mean guy, and he does that really well, but that's all we see of him. And so I really wish that maybe he would have had some more facets to his character, that we got to see him, because I know Pattinson is a wonderful actor, and he has some great range, and what he could bring to this production would have been spectacular, but it isn't there because his character just is minor. Mark Rylance in this is the standout. I mean, he is playing the magistrate, and he is so great to watch in his quietness. I mean, he is conveying to us so much through these quiet moments or these whispers or this measured tone in which he speaks. He weighs every single one of his words. And you can tell that that comes from a lifetime of observing, of just really paying attention and knowing and learning how to speak to other people. And he brings all of that wisdom through all of his actions and his communication. The scenery is beautiful and desolate. It's a daunting landscape of nothing that just leads to this huge feeling of isolation. There is a brutality to this story, and some of it is shown, and some of it is only hinted at and left to our imagination. And the dialogue in this, like a lot of what's going on and just how the whole presentation is of the film, it's measured, it's quiet, it's slow. It's not grandiose or just larger than life. I do like the overall story of this, just like I did with Hostels, but I have to admit that this is not going to be for everybody. And one that maybe not everybody is going to want to sit through either. It is going to require a great deal of patience, and I think being in the right mindset as well. Because if you're looking for action, this isn't it. I mean, this is character-driven story. We have so many scenes without dialogue, but the actors are conveying so much in simply their actions. I wouldn't call this a slow burn or a patient movie. It's just slow. It's less than 2 hours, but it feels much longer than that. And I think that's due to the pace and due to the quietness and just the action that happens or the lack of action that happens as the camera just sits on somebody and they just kind of go about their day minimally, or they take the time to look at a person or to wash some feet or to bandage a wound, anything like that. There is so much going on visually to take in, but again, the pace of this drags on. So if you are looking for something that is different, that is character driven, but not necessarily full of action, then you might want to check this one out because Mark Rylance, wow, such a good performance. There's no sex, a little nudity, some profanity, and some brutal violence. I give Waiting for the Barbarians 3 out of 5 couches. Next up is an Irish movie called The Shadow of Violence. We have a former boxer, Douglas Armstrong, nicknamed Arm. He gets mixed up with a drug-dealing thuggish family, and then he's made to be their enforcer. Arm is a simple man. You can see that he has a good heart, but his life doesn't allow that to shine through. There are some touching moments as well as sad moments in this because Arm has a son who looks to be autistic, and Arm doesn't really know how to deal with him. I mean, you see that he has this longing to connect with his son, but doesn't have the means to do so. He doesn't understand how to interact with a son who interacts with the world differently. Now, it's not all sadness in here. I mean, yes, there is sadness, there is grittiness, but there is a hope that is built into the story. The original title of this movie was called Calm with Horses, and that comes just from exactly what it sounds like, where Arm's son goes to horse therapy, and there you see him just relax, and what that does, being around the animals and being able to just commune with them, what that does to his own persona. And it's funny to watch that how when Arm has the opportunity to observe what that does to him as well. The central focus of the conflict that happens comes from the decision to not follow an order and all of the madness that then ensues from there. And you can kind of see where some of this is going because when a person tells another person to do X and they don't do it, well, then we know that Y is probably going to be that consequence. So in that aspect, this film is not original. I mean, the general just bad guy telling another bad guy to do something and then the discussion and the conflict that comes from that, that's not necessarily new. And all of the manipulation that is played in this, I mean, emotional, physical, just all of that really is kind of daunting. And it's feeling of oppressiveness. But through all of that darkness and that oppression, it allows the hero to just shine more brightly. Cosmo Jarvis stars as Arm, and he is wonderful to watch because at the beginning, he is a terrible and despicable character. I mean, we do not like him, and yet we get to watch character growth. Then he turns into somebody whom we can kind of root for and that we empathize with and that we begin to want him to succeed because we see the hope that his life has. You may not find the ending totally satisfying. In one way, it's beautiful and it's touching, But in the other way, it's frustrating because there's not a total sense of justice that is delivered, that not everything is wrapped up how we would like it to be. That sense of realism is good, but sometimes you want a happier ending. It's an hour and 40 minutes and didn't feel like it dragged at all. The pace was efficient and moving, but it wasn't rushed. While we get a good amount of development on Arm, the rest of the characters, especially the family with which he works for, seems to be just kind of underdeveloped. Like we don't get a whole lot of motivation for them or even their inner workings. I mean, we're just told they're bad guys and we get to see that illustrated and we get to see, yeah, okay, so you're a little unhinged and I wouldn't want to be around you. And I do have a reason to be scared of you and for people around you. But other than that, you're just a bad guy. I would have liked to have more relationship development between Arm and Dempna, who is played by Barry Keoghan. I mean, it is super dysfunctional relationship, and it's way unbalanced from a power standpoint, and not necessarily in the way that you would expect. I mean, not in a way that's obvious. That just adds again to that level of sadness that permeates a lot of the film. I had fun with this one, especially because I enjoy it when somebody stands up to a bully, when there is righteousness that is brought forth, that somebody decides to stand up against what was bad and take a stand regardless of the consequences therein. There's no sex but some nudity, a lot of profanity, and some very brutal violence. I give The Shadow of Violence 3.5 out of 5 couches. Last up is The Outpost. It came out in early July 2020, and it is about an American outpost in Afghanistan. It's a war story that's based on true events. And this American Army outpost is situated at the bottom of a valley with mountains surrounding the entire area. And they are there to not only defend that, but to also help the fight against the Taliban. The first half of this film is awkward and disjointed. The scene changes and transitions are very abrupt and they're almost abrasive. And sometimes a little confusing. And the same goes for some of our character introductions. Because these are based on real people that really lived, it's important to know their names because some of these people gave their lives. And so at the very beginning of the film, we're in a helicopter with a bunch of soldiers and it's very dark. And we get names on each of the people as we're introduced to them, but because it's dark, some of them have helmets on, some of it is just from the side or their faces in a lot of shadows. We don't really see them. So I don't feel that it was a great character introduction so that we could learn all of their names. And the next half an hour to 45 minutes-ish is just a really frenetic get to know you because not only just in the helicopter, those newly arriving soldiers, but all of the soldiers who have already been at the outpost. And so their names are flashed up as well as we meet them and as we interact. We do thankfully get some character development as we go along. A lot of it comes from small lines of dialogue, and we get to learn who the most important players, at least in the story that's being told to us, are. You get to see who are the bigger players and who are the minor players in this. And the minor players, they just fall to the background. Like occasionally we'll see them, but we may not necessarily remember their names. I do like that the tension builds steadily throughout the entire film. We get to see the soldiers engage with the villagers around them, with the people, but then each other. And just in all of their circumstances, you feel this mounting pressure. You know that there is something not good around the bend. All of the soldiers know it too, and they begin to, they talk about it openly because I think that's the way of they're dealing with it. They're just like, okay, this is what we have to do, and look, this is where we're exposed. Or if I were them, I would look at this and I would target this first. There are a lot of long takes in this, and they're used wonderfully. It is beautiful to watch, and it really engages us into the dialogue and the conversation and the action that's going on. But even more so than that, with those long takes, they also thrust us right into the middle of the action. The camera is so close and so embedded into what's going on that we feel like we are right there. At one point, with the action going on, bullets flying everywhere and just explosions happening, we are hopping in and out of a Humvee with the characters. And it felt like you're right there. And it was seamless too, because I loved it because as a character would hop into the Humvee and just naturally slide over to the next seat or to the next spot, we were right there with them, with the camera getting in. And so I felt like a passenger in that. I felt like somebody who was it was happening right around me. The smoke is blowing up around you. The dirt is flashing. Just the acting too, on point. Because as all of this chaos is going on, they're not breaking character. And half the time, I think that a lot of the falls that happen were just actually falls, that they weren't meant to fall at that spot because it's frenetic, because it's craziness, and it's just utter chaos. It happens. and it adds just a whole nother level of realism to everything that we're watching. The last half of the film is a battle, and it is so intense. I mean, we are right in the middle again of all of the frenzy. Now, I felt that there were really two standouts of actors in this film. One is Scott Eastwood, and it is crazy to watch at some points, especially when he's squinting and he's kind of doing this whispery talk type of thing, how much he looked and sounded exactly like his father. Oh, it was crazy. But he was good to watch, and he was great. I mean, he felt natural, like he was right in the position. He was very believable about what was going on, that he would stand up when he needed to and take charge at the appropriate times, and others just, you know what, we're going ahead. And then falling in line and taking the orders as he's instructed as well. Caleb Landry Jones is simply amazing in this. Now, his character is not necessarily one that everybody is drawn to, but his performance is awesome. He delivers a lot of different emotions in short succession, and we feel every one of them. I mean, he is so believable in everything that he is going through. This has been out for a little bit, but it is still totally worth checking out. I mean, if you enjoy movies like 13 Hours, something like that, where it is modern combat and just close quarters and tense and based on real life situations, then I think this one is probably right up your alley. There's no sex, but some nudity, a lot of profanity, and some very graphic violence. I give The Outpost 4 out of 5 couches. So have you seen any of these? What did you think of them? I'd love to know your thoughts on any of the movies, or even just this entire presentation, how you liked it with a whole bunch of movies shoved into one. I don't know. Let me know. We'll see if I do this again this way or if I do individual reviews. Verdict's out. If you enjoyed this review, though, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for catching with me.